Hello, we have Eric Champion with us. He's from Curtin University from Perth, Australia. So hello, nice to have you here at Delphi at our small symposium that happens one time in 2 years. So I'm going to ask you about your talk. You gave us a very interesting talk. The speech was about the new technologies and how they can be applied to the humanities and what we can expect from that. So can we just talk about it a little bit?
Yes, I was originally in IT and engineering schools, but I've always been teaching interaction design and game design. And so it's my way of using game design to bring multimedia students into understanding a little bit more and exploring heritage and history as an interactive thing and not necessarily as a book-based practice, because my students don't tend to read books anymore. They live through multimedia. So there's not much point in getting them to read about Homer or other ancient wonderful texts. But I found that when I gave them game design projects, for example, the Minotaur, we took panoramas and photographs from the British Archaeological Society of Knossos. There's actually labyrinthos. But I asked my students to recreate the story of the Minotaur, and they actually started reading Homer.
I see.
I didn't ask them. So sometimes you can actually get people very interested in heritage without realizing it. So there is something in game design called serious games or educational games or edutainment, but I prefer to call it learning by stealth. So they might think they're learning about one thing, and they are, but they're also learning about other things. And in this game, for example, we took the constraints, the bad things about the technology, and tried to use them positively. So this project was 10 years old. The head-mounted display that I had was very old. So the latency, the slowness was about one second or half a second. So
That's too bad.
Yeah, you would turn around, your head would turn around, and then the head-mounted display would turn around.
I see.
So how can you use that?
Yes.
Obviously in a horror game. So we took these head-mounted displays, we built in a game engine a virtual model of a simulated labyrinth, because the ones in Knossos are actually too small.
Yes, small.
And we designed biofeedback. So the students who were in between multimedia and IT, they designed their own simple biofeedback, and the idea was you would be given a plastic sword, you'd have this head-mounted display on, the sword would be tracked in 3D with a little motion tracker, but you would think you're going through the labyrinth. And you would be the hero who had to kill the Minotaur, and you would hear the Minotaur, the half-man, half-bull, snorting, and the sound would get louder and louder. But what we did with the biofeedback was we'd record all the players. So after the first play, you would start hearing, as you got closer to them, not your own heartbeat, but the heartbeat of the previous players.
Oh, wow.
And because the head-mounted display was so slow, you would turn a corner of the maze, and then the head-mounted display would turn the corner of the maze, and you'd actually see what you turned into. So that was very scary. But in Crete, the soldiers who had been to Crete told me, even 40 or 50 years later, they still remembered Crete because of the smell of the flowers. So to make people feel that they were there, we decided to plant electric fans, and like the 4 directions of the compass in front, north, east, west, and south. And we decided to put the smell of flowers on them, like leaves, herbs. So when you turned a corner, say you turned to the east, that fan would turn on you, so you'd feel the air coming and you would smell the scents. Because I remember when I worked on my project with Lonely Planet, when I did my PhD, the research director said one thing, and he'd been around the world millions of times, one thing about each country, when you travel to it, is the air feels different.
I see.
Does that make sense? So we tried to use all the bad things like the head-mounted display, etc., to make people actually, to make it work for people in a situated way. So they learned about biofeedback, they learned about Crete, they learned about the Minotaur, and they actually read Homer, and I didn't ask them to do any of it. So does that make sense?
Yes, this is a very interesting approach that you're taking. Okay.
But they also learned about the ethics of biofeedback, and also you can build your own biofeedback, which is actually technically very dangerous for people.
Yes.
So they had to see psychologists and engineers to help them stop electrocuting themselves, etc. So yes, I think I've also spoken to some virtual heritage labs, and they've actually said the students learnt more designing these games than playing them. So I actually think getting the students to learn about the games by designing them is actually probably more powerful at the moment. So why can't the public do that as well?
So we're turning everyone to a creator.
Exactly.
Okay.
A creator and an explorer.
Yes, and an explorer. Okay.
Well, you're an engineer. You probably were you mechanical or civil?
Electrical engineer.
Okay. But you had to go out into the real world and actually do real things?
Yes.
Yeah, well, as an architect, I found once I actually carried concrete myself, and I built roads as well,
Yes.
I began to appreciate things a bit more. I once worked with an engineer, and I'm sorry this is a story against engineering, but I once worked for an engineer who got, I think, 6 men to carry a steel beam up a slope, and he calculated it's only 30 kilograms each.
Okay.
This sounds like a good engineering problem, doesn't it? So 30 kilograms each for the steel beam sounds okay, but not in the mud, not when the height difference between the men is that much. So real world experience counts more than a number.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think also with people being able to think of games as creation systems and not just as display systems is the way to go.
Eric, in your speech, you mentioned something about the disappearance of the digital, the virtual archaeology, the virtual object, the digital objects, all that stuff, against what most people think that is disappearing. People think that we are going to lose what's real, and we are doing digitization, we are bringing all that stuff to the virtual world in order to preserve them. So you are somehow reversing the image. How can you comment on that?
Well, firstly, it's not my point originally, and secondly, it's also from talking to people involved in technology. So my point about digital heritage is disappearing faster than real heritage is actually a quote from Harold Thwaites, who was president of the Virtual Heritage Society. But also in the last year, Google themselves have come out and said, if you want to preserve all your digital photos, etc., take them off the digital archives because we can't promise they will be preserved, and make them physical. So Google themselves actually said, don't rely on the digital to preserve what you've got. But apart from Harold's point that we're not preserving it very well, I'm not actually attacking technology. I'm attacking our maintenance of technology, because I think in the sciences, when people write papers and provide data, other scientists check it and confirm that it can be replicated. And also in engineering. But in humanities, not so much.
Not so much.
So we need to change the mindset of the humanities people to make sure they maintain and go back to and build data, because science is a cumulative knowledge and humanities is often contested knowledge. And I think asking questions is very good for science as well. But in humanities, there are many things from science that we could learn and use better, I think, and digital technology can help us. But we can't rely on specific formats, and we can't rely on the skills still being there. And if you go to virtual heritage labs or digital humanities labs, one of the major problems they have is they get a very trained person who leaves very quickly and the knowledge is not shared. So that corporate knowledge, that business knowledge disappears. So we actually have several problems. We can't rely on free software by commercial providers to keep providing it. Google Drive will die out within a year, I guess you know. We don't necessarily train people to take on and pass on knowledge. We assume it's there. So we often join organizations with lots of paper, but actually the knowledge is shared between people. And that's very important. And thirdly, we're losing the skills of training people themselves. So I think that the digital is definitely the way to go for many things, especially for augmented reality. I think that's a huge field, because you don't destroy the thing that's there. You're just adding to it. But I think that there's serious problems in relying on digital, because another issue is it's not that we're losing data, we're developing so much data that we're losing data. We're losing the ability to find what we're looking for. So I think I've mentioned about 4 issues there. But in terms of virtual heritage, almost all the major virtual heritage models that I know of, you cannot find, you cannot download, or you can't even tell if they exist anymore. And I started off thinking about this 15 years ago when I went to a famous virtual heritage lab, and they showed me their wonderful SGI computers and their giant displays, and they turned to me and said, our students complain their computers at home are faster than our $1 million machines. So the obsolescence of technology is a huge thing, but I'm more actually concerned with the obsolescence of formats. Because if you do a virtual heritage model, it's so complicated, one thing wrong, it doesn't work. So it's not that I'm against technology, but I think that our community museums as well, schools and libraries as well, need to actually learn about how to organize data, share data, and preserve data. So it's actually, it sounds like a technical and pedantic issue, but it's actually restricting the whole field. Can I give you a completely unusual example? I was approached by a paleontologist. There's people who write papers on the bones of ancient people, and apparently in that field, nobody shares their data. So when they discovered a small type of species of human, apparently, in Indonesia, it was very difficult for people to go and then prove that was a new species of human. They would not publish the actual data online. So there's no digital models to share. So you have to read a journal and you read the measurements and that's it. You can't get close to the original models. And he said he wanted to use game engines and create a format so you could share 3D models. And I said, what? And he said, well, actually, there's a huge controversy in his field. There's a company called Bone Clones in San Francisco. And they read these papers about bones, about ancient people, and then they reconstruct it from the measurements in the journals. Yeah. So they have this huge copyright problem because they've kept everything closed source. So it's not just a problem in the humanities, but it's also in the sciences, but it's particularly...
In the sciences, yes.
But what I loved about engineering is if you thought there was a problem, you either tore it apart or you built a new one. Mm-hmm. What we need to do in the humanities? So I'm not saying get rid of technology at all. Actually, I'm saying we just have to we shouldn't believe in it and be too loyal to it.